For Aries, Sun, Moon, and Rising sign, or also known as the Ascendant sign, we're looking at the 8th house for this lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And that's a really deep place. The 8th house is about intimacy, and it can also reveal secrets in the sense of either what you're about to learn from other people, but it can also be secrets about yourself. It's from unconscious, deep psychological places that you might start to be comfortable with, or you become aware of. That can be a psychological pattern from before, or it can be something that you realize now is kind of holding you back in some way. This is also the house of shared resources of all kinds. That's where you get your boost from, whether that be financial or moral. And often it's connected to a partner of some kind, either a marriage partner or business partner. So you might also become more aware of the condition or the shape of your finances. This can also have something to do with spiritual or occult awareness. So the full moon is calling us back to October of 2022. And in that time, we had the partial solar eclipse in Scorpio. And then a couple of weeks later, on the 8th of November, there was the total lunar eclipse in Taurus. And at that point, the sun was in roughly the same place that the moon is now. And so any of the things that I've just enumerated may have already kind of had a seed planted or had a sense of something transpiring last October and November. So you can have a look at what was going on back then, 6 months ago roughly, and see how it's resonating with you now. There may be something that needs adjusting in money areas of your chart, because that 8th house and 2nd house axis, where we find the sun in opposition to the moon, which is giving us this full moon, and then we also find the north node, or Rahu, which is giving us the eclipse part of this story, and the south node, Ketu, which is with the moon in the 8th house. All of that is shaping up to tell the story of this money axis or a values axis, something that has to do with your more intimate sense of security or safety in the world. That also is about what is supporting you in terms of the North Node. It might be in the last year and a half you've started to realize that you needed to stand up for yourself a bit more and stop relying on others. And maybe now you're just coming to that realization as the moon is there. Perhaps this was a similar understanding last October, November. There's something that you need to do differently with regards to how you exchange money with others. This would not be a good time, for example, to take out a loan with a friend particularly, but I think at this particular stage, not a great time to borrow money. If you can wait till the energy clears from this eclipse, it's much, much better. And indeed, you're going to have then Jupiter go into your house of money as of the 16th of May, which will also be much, much better for you in terms of money. So just hang on. And if you do need money, try and make do if you can until the eclipse energy has passed, certainly after the first week or 10 days of May. So Mercury is also retrograde in the 2nd house for you. This is, again, the house of money. It's income and money that you earn from, if you were, for example, an employee. Where, for example, the 8th house is more like money you earn from business dealings that you have with people. That could include clients, for example, or business partnerships. That can also include your spouse's income in the 8th house. But the 2nd house is about you. Either way, this Mercury retrograde there in the 2nd house, which is continuing right through till about the 14th of May, is going to have you reflecting even more on all of these things. So your attention is being drawn there at the time of the eclipses. And then now there's this mulling over. There's this kind of sense of, okay, what next? What do I do about this? It looks like you have quite a lot of insight around this, or at least perhaps some new ideas about how you can show up in that regard, because the sun is also right next to Uranus at this time. And so that's really helpful for some very new perspectives, some very different things happening around money. This can also be with regards to your self-worth. And the important thing to connect with is that sense of your value being a reflection of how you value money. and the way that money shows up in your life as also a reflection of how you value yourself, and that it's not about blaming you for whatever circumstance you might be finding yourself in. It's about just understanding that the way that we handle money is really very much to do with how we handle our own self-worth, and for good or bad. So this might be a clue where the moon is showing up in the 8th house, where you can look deeper into your, deeper psychology, what kinds of things might be showing up in terms of money issues for you, old fears around that kind of thing. Your ruler, and this is also the ruler of the eclipse, so Mars ruling you and the eclipse, is in the 4th house, and that's another emotional house. So one way or another, Aries, you're dealing with a lot of intimate stuff at the moment. This can also be specific to property. It can be actual work that you have to do around your home, your house and home, land that you own. This can also bring up family issues. For example, the 4th house can be the family that surrounds you, also families that you're related to through legacy or through your ancestral patterns. This is also where we find Saturn and Neptune in the 12th house, coming with this same kind of energy of something hidden behind the scenes that could also be connected to family in terms of distant connections to family, ancestral connections. And all of that ties in on your personal level in terms of your inner emotional or psychological experience. So it looks like this eclipse could be quite transformational for you. You do have Jupiter in your 1st house still, and that has been a boost for pretty much since Christmas of 2022. You had it also in the spring from May through October, and you have pretty much a week or 10 days left of Jupiter in your 1st house. So it does feel like a boost. It does feel like you have a sense of what is possible for you, a sense of optimism about things going forward. And then as Jupiter shifts into your 2nd house on the 16th of May, that's going to be probably bringing some real benefit in terms of the money situation that you might be dealing with, or in terms of any self-worth situation that you may have been dealing with as well, including family. Although Jupiter is Jupiter, it just expands. When it's not in its own rulership, Jupiter expands. It creates a lot of whatever it is that it's doing there. In your case, it's in the 2nd house in Taurus. That doesn't always necessarily mean that things are going to be, it's not going to be like raining down money suddenly. It means that money can be a major focus for you, although it tends to be quite favorable. The Jupiter going through the 2nd house can also again be another signature of being busy with family issues, because the 2nd house is whatever supports you. With Jupiter going through there, you might find that you have more connection with family. Perhaps you can, if you need a loan, or if you do need help, you might be able to get some money from family, or at the very least some other form of support for family. So all in all, whatever seems to be brewing now that might not be super easy to handle, it looks like in the next couple of weeks after the eclipse, things are going to improve. Even Venus, which is going from your 3rd house into your 4th house on the 7th of May, so just a couple of days after this eclipse, it's going to improve that whole atmosphere around your emotional nature, because you've had Mars in that 4th house, which can also be about kind of being cranky, to be honest. It's Mars in Cancer, can be grouchy around the home, grouchy with your family, moody, and lots of mood swings potentially. Given that it's your ruler, and in the 4th house, there can be something pretty edgy going on with your family in all different directions. Or if it's something that you're doing around the home in terms of renovations and so on, there may have been quite a lot of stress around that. Venus will come in and appease that somewhat. So that should be a much more pleasant experience going forward. So good luck with all of this, Aries, and I'll see you in the next video. Taurus, this lunar eclipse is in your 7th house, and it's ruled by Mars from your 3rd house. So, whatever is coming up for you in the seventh house of partnership and how you are in relationships, how you're doing relationships, let's say, is driven by the third house of communications. And so, there perhaps is something that needs to be spoken about, something that needs to be discussed, something that would benefit you if you find a clearer way of communicating or stepping up for yourself. It could be with Mars in Cancer that you actually need, to say something more assertively. This is one of the signatures of Taurus is not wanting to speak up terribly forcefully. And again, that will depend on your chart. You might be one of those Tauruses that is actually quite assertive if you have a number of planets in different positions. But the typical Taurus energy as an archetype has Cancer ruling the third house of communication and siblings. And so that can be quite up and down, and it can be a little bit you might be a bit evasive in communications, avoiding saying what's on your mind. And with Mars going through there, it's really difficult to do that. And so whatever might be showing up in relationships may even be something that you've really needed to say for quite a while. So this might come with a really strong feeling of needing to step up. Now that Mars and Moon are in a mutual reception, so it's quite supportive energy, although it's not necessarily comfortable. Neither the Moon nor Mars are in a really happy place at this point. But it's definitely going to give you courage in terms of speaking up if needed. There's something that you're changing about relationships, and that's been very strong since January of 2022, when the South Node or Ketu started moving through that seventh house. And it's coming close to the end now. So by July, mid-July now, that South Node is going to move into your sixth house, and the energy will be very different. So all this time, Taurus, you've been reshaping yourself and maybe rediscovering something about what you need. At this time, the sun being the opposite to the moon for this full moon is also with Uranus. And so something very different might be sparking your awareness, a different sense of, especially if you are a Taurus sun, a different sense of what you need. This can, of course, apply if you're a rising sign or moon sign as well. But this sense with the sun could even be with regards to work and how you want to change that. Maybe a sense of a new career possibility. But nonetheless, when we've got all of that energy there for some new insights into all of that, with Uranus really charging the sun up at this time, as well as Rahu or the North Node being in your first house, there's a real opportunity here for things to change in quite a significant way with you, with regards to your relationships, with regards to your work, with regards to your emotional needs. Mercury is retrograde in your sign at this time. It continues to be retrograde right through till the 14th of May. So that's something quite interesting, because that also gives you an opportunity to slow down and reflect on all of these things that I've just outlined. It's very much about you, in this case, Taurus. It's very much about what you need. Mercury rules your second house, and that's where we find your ruler, Venus. And so Mercury ruling the second house, and with Venus there in the second house, they're supporting each other in many, many ways. And so this can have something to do with your values as well. And are you standing up for your values in relationship in general? Are you taking care of your needs? Are you taking care of your material needs? Because Venus in the second is also about your material needs. Now, as of the 7th of May, Venus is going to move into the third house with Mars. And so she's going to also give you a lovely boost in terms of communications. This could have something to do with siblings as well, or your neighborhood in general, and things to do with maybe even cousins and other day-to-day engagements like that. But generally speaking, the third house is everything to do with exchanges and communications of all kinds. And when Venus is there, it's really helpful. Given that it's your ruler, this will help smooth out any rough edges that you might be experiencing around relationships, or in terms of these revelations around how you want to be in relationship. And so you might just feel that with Venus going through there all the way through till the 5th of June, you've got now an opportunity to speak up in a way that can be more harmonious and more to your liking, because it's more your style to want harmony. Jupiter is only a few days away at the point of the eclipse. It's only about 10 days away or so from moving into your first house. And this is going to be quite significant for you, Taurus. I'll speak about that in another video, but just make the most of this Jupiter having gone through the 12th house, really showing you in your unconscious processes or in your sense of what you become aware of patterns of behavior that you may have noticed over the last almost year that Jupiter has been there that may not have been serving you. And so you've had this opportunity in so many ways, especially since Christmas of 2022, to really understand how you need to modify either your behavior or the people around you in some way, or getting more solid in your spiritual sense of self. And by the time then Jupiter moves into your first house, then you'll have a feeling of confidence and kind of can-do that lets you get out there, lets you get into a new cycle, in fact, because it's Jupiter in your first house, starting a new cycle from the 16th of May, basically. It's a year-long trend. So enjoy this moment. It's quite a liminal moment where you're starting to recognize things that you might need, how you might need to show up for yourself a wee bit better. Certainly why you might need to say something or how you might need to say it, that is becoming much more important for you. And this is a really interesting time for you to stretch out a little bit, because also as of July, when the nodes change, and I'll speak more about that in a future video, but when the nodes change, there's going to be much more emphasis on that 12th house for you, where the emphasis is off you now, and it's much more about what you need in a deeper sense. So you might feel that there's a balance now between sort of stepping up to what you need and how you need to express that, and then also how to reinforce that from the more hidden aspects of the chart. Taurus, there's a really interesting resonance with this eclipse and the eclipse that was in your sign on November 8th of 2022. So the total lunar eclipse in Taurus at that time was at 15, almost 16 degrees of Taurus. And that's where, so that was where the moon was, and that's where the sun is on the 5th of May. And then the moon, where it is today, or on the 5th of May, is where the sun was on the 8th of November. So really look back over these past 6 months and see what has changed, what's coming up, because something will tell you more. You'll be able to understand better the situation that you're experiencing, especially with regards to your role in relationships. The other eclipse in 2022 was the 25th of October, which also resonates with this time. That was in Scorpio, in the 2nd degree of Scorpio. And so that's where we had that's where the south node is currently. And that's where the sun and moon would have been at that time. So this energy for you of the 7th house is really recalling something of about 6 months ago, Taurus. So think deeply about that. 25th of October, 8th of November, you were certainly very personally concerned, very personally involved with this, as you have been, of course, since the beginning of January 2022. But this seems to resonate very strongly with that. So go over that territory and see what was happening for you then, and maybe that will help illuminate whatever is going on right now. And you can use that Mercury retrograde to figure out what to do about that. So best wishes for all of this, Taurus, and I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, this lunar eclipse is happening in your 6th house, and that's exchanging with Mars in your 2nd house. So there's a lot here to do with work and money, your value potentially as well, but it could be about your everyday life. The 6th house is very much a house of the practical stuff, the stuff that you might need to get done as you go through your day-to-day experience. It could be with regards to colleagues as well, with regards to employees as well, if you are an employer. And the 6th house is, of course, our health as well. With Mars in the 2nd house, that can be pretty good. The health aspects are not usually challenged by Mars in the 2nd. It would have to depend, of course, on your own chart, but it is the Mars-ruled moon in the 6th house, and so it is still worthwhile paying attention to any health issues that might come to your attention. So especially if there's any issue of inflammation bowel disease, any kind of sexual problems, sexual diseases. These kinds of things are very Scorpio related. And this can be something that you can take good care of as you recognize the problem. If the sixth house is more about how you're showing up every day and what it is that you feel you need to do differently, this could also be a really interesting realization, because with all of the planets opposing from your 12th house, we have the North Node and the Sun, which are creating this lunar eclipse in opposition to the Moon and the South Node. And then Mercury retrograde, as well as Uranus, also in Taurus in your 12th house. So there's an enormous amount of stuff going on behind the scenes here. And the result of what's going on behind the scenes is showing up in your everyday life. Now, this can also show up as things like addiction, for example, or behavior that's undermining you in some way, things that are not really working out, or if it's not at all that case, if it's something much more anodyne than that, it could also be that it's about things that are far away from you, friends or family that are at a distance, or your business is actually at a distance, and there's a lot of impact on your life right now in terms of your income and in terms of your day-to-day work because of events that are happening abroad. Lord knows there are events happening around the world that might concern one or two of you. But nonetheless, it's a lot going on behind the scenes. It's not the stuff that you can kind of touch and feel in everyday life. It's much more intimate than that. And so with this Mercury retrograde in that part of the chart, in the 12th house, where you can reflect on, you know, your deeper sense of your needs, maybe a need to even step back consciously, stepping back to retreat a little bit, give yourself more space and time. This could really bring some benefit in terms of the sixth house and whatever's going on there, and especially so if this is an emotional concern or some kind of psychological concern that's showing up in your life. With Mars in the second house, there's a lot of activity around money, around your sense of value. This can also have to do with family, so there may be some extra need to rely on family, or an extra commitment, a responsibility towards your family at this time, some kind of challenge in terms of what supports you, maybe that you're having to go it alone a little bit more than you'd really like to do. And this is something that you can reflect on as well while Mercury is retrograde until the 14th of May. Now, whether you are Sun, Moon, or Rising sign, Gemini, this Mercury retrograde is ruling your ascendant, and that's something to pay attention to, because it puts a lot more of your personal energy in the sort of in a lower gear, let's say, where you're really looking deeper in. Things might take a little bit longer than you might be used to. That Mercury is also sextiling Saturn, and so when your ruler is sextiling Saturn, it can be quite productive. It can make you quite ambitious and goal-oriented, but it can also just have the effect of slowing things down, which is not a bad thing. Mercury retrograde, giving you a little more time to reflect on things that may have already happened, and especially if you want to go back in time, go back to October and November. 25th of October, we had an eclipse also in Scorpio, and on the 8th of November we had the lunar eclipse in Taurus, which was at the same place that we find the moon right now at this eclipse. So there may be some information there that Mercury retrograde can help you go back over, and Saturn will help you stick with it. It'll help you stabilize that, because Saturn is coming from the place of your responsibilities, your social status as well. And so if there is some element of self-undoing here with all of this activity in your 12th house, I would say, for example, be scrupulously honest at this time, be scrupulously scrupulous in so many ways, because there's a lot of unsettled energy at this time, and whatever is coming back for review can be clarified at this time. You've got Venus in your first house, which is really helpful for this kind of thing. And then Venus moves into your second house, where she'll be even more comfortable, by the way. Not only does Venus like being in the second house, but also in Cancer. A little bit more comfortable than in Gemini, where she's a bit busy. But nonetheless, it's going to be a real boost to all of this, including at the very least a boost to your self-esteem or a boost to your sense of self-worth. But with Venus moving into the second with Mars there could be a couple of weeks where you really have quite a lot of energy for earning, better earning opportunities. Maybe you find some real insights as at around the time of this eclipse for how to change your life in day-to-day ways, in ways that establish better patterns for you to improve your finances or improve your sense of self-worth overall. So that Venus will be there in your second house as of the 7th of May. So just a couple of days actually after this eclipse. And then she'll be there all the way through till the 5th of June. So that's really, really nice for you. So that's pretty much it for you, Gemini. Have a great time with this eclipse. I think there's a lot that you can change in your day-to-day life if it's necessary. Change health issues, observe whatever might be coming up that is preventing you from feeling that you're succeeding or feeling that you're able to do the things that you need to. And take good care of all of those little details that sometimes you might gloss over by just being in a bit of a hurry, and use that Mercury, you remember your Lord, Mercury retrograde to dot the I's and cross the T's as much as you need to. So good luck with all of that, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, this lunar eclipse is in your 5th house, and Mars is ruling this from your 1st house. So there's a lot of energy here from you personally into this energy of the eclipse. It might have something to do with your children, for example. If you have any, it might be something to do with the area of children. It might be a desire for them, for example. Maybe with the moon there, you're discovering something about your children, or even discovering that you're pregnant. That's entirely possible. With Mars in the 1st house, nonetheless, it gives you a lot of energy at this time, and that's reflected in that Scorpio eclipse energy. If you go back into October of 2022, so the 25th of October, we had a Scorpio eclipse as well. And that was kind of on the point where we now have the south node. So it's a couple of degrees away, but nonetheless, it's an interesting thing to look back on. And then if you look back on the 8th of November of 2022, we had the Taurus lunar eclipse. And that was at the point where at that time, the moon was where the sun is now in Taurus, and the moon in Scorpio was opposing the sun in Scorpio was opposing that moon at the same point that the moon is right now. So there's quite a lot of resonance that you could experiment with, going back about 6 months and seeing what was going on for you at that time around the 5th house issues of all kinds. That can also be around love, of all kinds, love in general, but love affairs in particular, romance. It can be around your sense of fun and hobbies, what it is that you love to do. And this can also be just pure dumb luck. That's also stuff that can just show up for you, that you can become aware of, opportunities that you can become aware of, because the 5th house is quite a lucky house. And from the 11th house, there's a lot of activity, as you know, from past reports since basically January of 2022. You've had the North Node going through there. Rahu has been there for now 15 months or so, and it continues to be there until so 16 months almost with Rahu there, and then it continues to be there until mid-July. So this is really about establishing a new sense of what it is that you want. Your dreams and goals can be around friendships as well, but it's also a house of gains. So that 11th house, 5th house axis is a really helpful energy when you're talking about eclipses or energies that are, regenerating something. So look for ways that might be new and creative, especially in terms of career and potential for earnings, or new ways of finding ways to generate some benefit for your finances, because it is the 11th house of finance house. The sun is with Uranus at this time, and that can bring you some kind of insight or some kind of new awareness of ways that you can make money, as well as with Rahu on Mercury. North Node on Mercury can give you some new ideas. If it's not around earning money, it could be around also just the sense of values that you have. It's Taurus after all, but it is usually something to do with the real stuff of what sustains you with regards to Taurus. And now Mercury is retrograde, and with that Mercury retrograde in that same place, you do have an opportunity to review how things have been going in that domain. So whether that be around the gains from your career, for example, or about your hopes and dreams for the future, or just about friendships. There's a lot in there that can have you reflecting on what needs to change, and keep the bigger picture in mind as you go back 6 months or so, where you really start to go back and understand what it is that was changing for you back then. Venus has been in the 12th house for a few weeks now. That's a pretty common hidden part of the chart for Venus, and she'll be soon after this eclipse on the 7th of May moving into your first house. So it's whether you're sun, moon, or rising, it's the first house from any of those placements. So it's a real bonus to have Venus there. And this will have you feeling just really lovely. It gives you a feeling of being beautiful and charming, and people will respond to you in that way. It's a really nice energy that will balance out some of the Mars energy that has been so edgy for the last few weeks, since the 25th of March when Mars moved in there in your first house. So enjoy that energy, because that energy of Venus in the first is also going to help you perhaps feel a little bit stronger about whatever is going on right now at the time of these eclipses, because Venus is ruling that north node of the eclipse while the Mars is ruling the south node. And so you're going to have them both in the first house, and there's something very personal to you that you can do about balancing the energy of the eclipses in this axis of Scorpio and Taurus. So something very interesting to mull over. How can you play a role in this regard? And of course, given that the moon is your ruler, Cancer, the moon, wherever it is always a place of interest for you. And so the moon is, of course, the thing that's being eclipsed. It's being shed. And in some ways, we can interpret this as something that you need emotionally, potentially, or in terms of your creative impulses you need to let go of. Perhaps that can also be with regards to your children. Maybe there's some aspect of your children that you need to let go of, that you need to, or to just do differently, and reharmonize or rebalance that relationship for you and for them. So as Jupiter is just in the 10th house now, you've got another few days after this eclipse, maybe about 10 days after this eclipse, to enjoy that Jupiter boost in your house of career. And then it'll move into your 11th house of gains, and also groups and associations, where all of this energy is very strongly concentrated now in Taurus. So this looks like a really promising spring, Cancer. Lots of new growth, lots of new opportunities. And I wish you every success with all of that. I'll see you in the next video. Leo, this eclipse is happening in your 4th house. So the moon is in the 4th house while the sun is in the 10th house. So there's quite a lot here to do with your responsibilities out in the world compared to what it is that you need emotionally. And keeping in mind that the sun is your ruler, it's always very important for you to track where the sun is going through the chart. The sun is very powerful at the top of the chart in the 10th house. And so that moon in the 4th can be showing you something about what it is that you need, what it is that you need to establish in terms of your emotional security or your psychological security. And it looks like that's been changing quite a lot over the last year and a half, roughly, while the South Node has been moving through that part of your chart. If you go back, you'll notice something from October 25th, when we had the partial solar eclipse in Scorpio, which was roughly where these nodes are now, and on November 8th, where we had the total lunar eclipse, which was at 15 degrees of Taurus, 15, 16 degrees of Taurus, where the sun is now. So the energies are kind of swapped. So last year, the sun was in the position of the moon, where it is now, and the moon was in the position of the sun, where it is now. And so this is a really interesting reversal to pay attention to and see what is resonating for you compared to 6 months ago. There may be something you're realizing about the work and home balance, or your sense of what you need to feel established and what it is that you're being called to do out in the world. Especially because Uranus has been going through that house as well. So the North Node plus Uranus going through the house of career, that's a lot of new stuff. It's a lot of change, a lot of instability in that regard. And so your sense of responsibilities, your sense of what it is that you do in the world, your social status has probably been fluctuating quite a lot, and even more dramatically so since January of 2022. So Mercury is currently retrograde there. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to reflect on all of these things, go over, these issues of the last 6 months, but at the very least go over the last few weeks where Mercury has been cruising over the top of your chart. And just notice, maybe only the last, say, 10 days or 2 weeks, certainly since the eclipse of the 20th of April, this will have been significant for you. So lots to think about in terms of how you show up in the world. What are your goals and ambitions? Mercury is turning direct on the 14th of May. So after that point, your Mercury will go fast through the 10th house, and you'll be able to kind of resolve or accomplish the things that you've been reflecting on up until that point. So a really interesting time for you as you maybe reconsider what it is that you're doing in terms of your status, or at the very least how you're doing it. So Mars, which is ruling this lunar eclipse, is in your 12th house, and it has been since the 25th of March. It's going to stay there until the 20th of May. So there's a lot of kind of itchiness, unconscious itchiness, perhaps a feeling of real wanting to change, wanting things to be different. Because the moon, as well as Saturn and Mars, are all in hidden houses of your chart. The moon in the 4th of your psychological foundation, Saturn in your 8th, which is unconscious processes and your fears and issues that might be even potentially secret or intimate to you. And then, of course, Mars in the 12th house, which is also an unconscious process, or processes that can even lead to your own undoing. So there might be something that you're becoming aware of with that moon in the 4th. And that can be a real, an opportunity for you to understand something that is quite profound, quite deep. Just a couple of days after this eclipse, we've got Venus moving into that 12th house. So she's currently in the house of your hopes and dreams and friendships and so on. That might have been a lovely energy to enjoy. That's also a house of gains. And so you might have even had some potential career gains in terms of finances, or just pure dumb luck as well, because you also have Jupiter in the 9th. But that Venus joining Mars in the 12th house can also help you in terms of feeling better about all of that, feeling a bit more harmony around all of that, and perhaps being able to reconcile that through relationships, through what it is that you need to do about that. Because of course Venus is very much about relationships, about how you value others and how you value yourself. So Jupiter is preparing only about 10 days after this eclipse to go into your 10th house. So enjoy these last few days of Jupiter in the 9th, where you're really getting clearer on what it is that you want out of life, what it is that you feel your purpose is. Jupiter has been expanding your sense of what you see yourself doing in this lifetime, and also what you believe and your sort of higher-minded nature. But that is going to swap places with the nodes over the summertime. So Jupiter moves into your 10th on the 16th of May, and then the nodes will move into your 9th in the middle of July. So there's quite a lot of energy here for you to achieve, a great time to show up in a new way in your life. And it's a good couple of weeks for you to use that Mercury retrograde to really assess what it is that you want. In the French say reculer pour mieux sauter. It's like you want to back up a little bit so you can get a better run and jump. And this is what Mercury in your 10th house is offering you as it's retrograde right now. And that will help you then when Jupiter activates the 10th house even more after this eclipse, and when you come across this realization, whatever it is that's going on now, that will help you then move forward. So it's a good time to slow down and take, don't let yourself be impatient around this time, because especially with all of this being very public, very social, whatever is going on, it's not just important to you, it's important to others as well. And at the very least, it's visible to others. So definitely worth putting some attention on. So Leo, make the best of this time. I wish you all the best with it, and I'll see you in the next video. Virgo, this lunar eclipse is in your 3rd house. So that's house of communication. It's also your neighbors, your neighborhood, your siblings. It's got a lot to do with your life skills as well. And because you've got the opposite end of this eclipse, the sun and the north node in your 9th house, there seems to be something to do with new opportunities to either communicate something that you need to express or to learn something that you need to absorb. That could also be in the form of new skills. The moon always brings us an awareness of something. It's always about revealing something. When the seed was planted, then we have this understanding of something that comes later as the moon expands. And in this case, it can be something to do with an understanding of what skills you might need to develop, what you might need to change in your communication style, for example. It could be with regards to brothers and sisters or cousins, or something going on in their lives, for example, that's not necessarily directly connected to you, but it's something that is going on with them that, of course, indirectly affects you. Certainly, there's something here that you can experience in terms of your sense of purpose as well. So maybe the fact that the North Node has been going through this part of the chart since January of 2022 and bringing you a lot of awareness, a lot of attention into that area of what is my life purpose? What am I here for? Higher knowledge, higher wisdom, wanting to know more, wanting to expand into life. Well, all of that energy is very, very strong right now. So it looks like you could really realize that I don't want to do the thing I'm doing, or I do want to do the thing I'm doing, but I need to do it differently, and I need to develop skills around that. Communication of all kinds, of course, are a big factor, and especially so because the ruler of this eclipse is in the 11th house. The 11th house is our house of friendship. It's the groups and associations that we have. It's a very social house. And it also, much like the 3rd house, it represents internet. So where the 3rd house is much more the sort of the workings of the internet, the sort of detailed nuts and bolts aspects of the internet, maybe like a website, for example. The 11th house is what you do with that. It's kind of like the way of networking through that. You could even consider that social media, for example. So let's say the third house is what you type in your social media post, and the 11th house is what happens to that. So it can be in real life, or it can be in social media terms, but Mars is there and it's bringing out a lot of energy in that regard. And that can be a bit itchy because Mars in the 11th also can cause a certain amount of disruption in your social relationships of all kinds. But it doesn't have to be like that. It can also just be that you're feeling very assertive, very forceful. And of course, that Mars is ruling the 3rd house at this moment. And it's also ruling your 8th house, where we find Jupiter. And that's also about, Jupiter has also been showing you areas of what you share with others, things like money or even values that you share with others. And it may have had you sort of do a bit of housekeeping around what it is that you're afraid of, or what might be holding you back, or issues that are connected to deeper psychological things, or of course it could be occult things as well, like what we're doing here, this astrology, similar things. But that Mars ruling both the eclipse and the Jupiter there can bring you some real gems of understanding that can be very, very helpful, because in just 10 days after this eclipse, that Jupiter moves into that ninth house where you've been doing so much exploring in terms of what you're here for. And that ninth house also is where we find your ruler Mercury, which is currently retrograde, and it's retrograde until about the 14th of May. And all the more reason to reflect on your goals and what it is that you need to achieve, what it is that you want to communicate. If you're a student, for example, this is really good for revising for exams. You slow yourself down, take time to put more effort into remembering, revising, redoing. If you're a teacher, for example, then this would be about perhaps reorganizing your teaching format, or going over things that you've already done. That teachers are famous for doing stuff like that. You have to tell the class 10 times before they remember. So Mercury retrograde is a great time to do that. And so that rulership, your Mercury up there in the ninth house, is also pulling your attention even more so to all of these big questions that have been on your mind since the beginning of January 2022. With Uranus there next to the sun, also in the ninth house. Of course, Uranus has been there since May of 2018, so this is not a new thing, but the sun is approaching Uranus at the time of this eclipse, quite close to it. And so there could be some really interesting insights. If there's been any doubt or worry around your capacity to assume a new role in terms of your sense of purpose, or in terms of how you want to show up in the world. Or, by the way, the ninth house is also about foreign lands, going abroad, traveling abroad. Travel with a purpose, though, not just like hanging out at the beach. But if any of that is on your mind, then it could be that you find something really insightful, that you're quite aware now of what it is that you want. With Saturn going through your seventh house of relationships in opposition to either your sun, moon, or ascendant, then this can also have the effect of stabilizing relationships and clarifying them. So you find that kind of spontaneously, almost automatically, things clear out. New relationships are formed. Old relationships kind of taper off. And the ones that are sturdy, the ones that have lasting ability, are going to stick around. And you'll find by the end of that Saturn transit through the seventh house that you know who your friends are. Which is a great place to be. And at this moment, that could also be part of this equation of what it is that needs to be said and to whom. How do I need to express myself? With that moon in the third house, it could be very much tied into that Saturn sorting out whatever's going on in relationships for you. So make the most of this time, Virgo. Enjoy all of that energy that is pulling you into a broader picture of yourself. And I'll see you in the next video. Libra, this eclipse is happening in your second house. So you have a lunar eclipse in the second that's bringing a lot of your attention to issues around income, money, your valuables. So what you value and your valuables, all your stuff. And that's in opposition to the eighth house where we find the sun. So we have the south node and the moon in the second house, and the north node and the sun in the eighth house. Now that can be something to do with an axis of money. Very often it's with regards to finances. But not only, this can also be with regards to values that you share. And maybe you're realizing something about your own values compared to the values of the people around you, including your business partner or your life partner. So that might have you reflecting in a different way. The second house is also family and everything that supports you. So this could be an opportunity for you to recognize that you might have, you might not be as supported as you need to be, and you might need to ask for support, or you might need to find a new way of being in your family in some way. It can be as simple as understanding what makes your health strong. What supports you is also your diet and lifestyle, for example. And although that day-to-day stuff is in the sixth house as well, the second house is what nourishes you. And so that also can be factoring in here, because you've got Saturn in the sixth house. and just since March. And so there may be things showing up in terms of your health that you're recognizing need more attention. Maybe with the moon there, you're realizing maybe you just need more support. I think this could be very strongly indicated by the North Node going through the 8th house. It could be new revelations, even with the Sun and the North Node and Mercury retrograde now. And then, of course, Uranus still in your 8th house. All of that energy in the 8th house can be pulling you deeper into your psychological self, what it is that you understand about yourself, what it is that you might not have recognized, but now can see a little bit better. That may have been an obstacle coming through an actual form of relationship that might be something to do with your marriage partner, again, business partnerships, or even in the case of clients, you might have a realization that, with the moon in the 2nd house, for example, now you realize, gosh, I need to raise my fees. I need to change the way I operate with clients because I'm recognizing something that might be diminishing my own value. Yeah, and you've got Mars, which is ruling this moon, this lunar eclipse, and also ruling your 7th house of relationships from the 10th house, which is a really strong position for Mars, except that it's Mars in Cancer. And so it can be a bit broody, it can be a bit moody. And with Mars in the 10th, nonetheless, it makes you very ambitious, gives you a really strong drive. But you might find that that's running either hot and cold, or that it's more that there can be a feeling of conflict with either your higher ups or with competitors of any kind, where you might feel that there's some kind of need to assert yourself, or they feel they need to assert themselves with regards to you for whatever reason. So your career goals, your sense of achievement, your sense of ambition and drive is very, very strong at this time. And that may have something to do with this moon in the 2nd house, with that Mars in the 10th house. You could actually be feeling, now I need to ask for a pay rise, for example, if you're working for somebody else, or you might decide that if you are working on your own, that you need to reorganize how you operate in terms of your day-to-day management, in terms of how you show up in the running of your own company. Now, Venus is going to help you with this because your ruler, Venus, is in the 9th house right now at the time of this eclipse, which is lovely because it's a very lucky house. But she is soon to move into your 10th house. And that's really nice. When Venus goes into the 10th house, especially if you're looking at issues around money, or if there's any kind of need to rebalance your sense of income or your values in that kind of thing, that kind of energy, let's say, that's really significant. Venus is also ruling your 8th house as well as your ascendant. So Venus at the top of your chart brings you some really great good fortune, and she loves being in Cancer. Maybe a bit self-indulgent, but why not? I don't see why not, honestly. Especially with Venus going in there. Now, she goes in there on the 7th of May, so it's only just a couple of days after this eclipse. You can really start to feel more confident in what it is that you're doing in terms of your career or your drive, your ambition, your goals. That can be with regards to family, in the sense of parents, by the way, maybe needing to do something for your parents. But with Venus there, it just makes everything a little bit easier, a little more pleasant. So if there is something connected to money around the time of this eclipse, my dear Libras, wait until Venus is in your 10th house. And she'll smooth out the rough edges of Mars. She'll bring you great benefits in terms of your outer ambitions. And that can be quite a good opportunity from the financial point of view. Nonetheless, Venus is still trining you, especially if it's your ascendant. You'll feel this the most. So that's always very fortunate when your ruler is trining you. So you'll feel good anyway. But as she moves out of the 9th and into the 10th, whether it be from your sun, moon, or ascendant, we're talking just signs from those placements, then she will be sextiling the other house of rulership, which is Taurus, and that can also be a great support. And that will happen roughly at the same time that Jupiter then moves into that 8th house as well. I'll speak more about that in another video. So you've got a few more days now around the time of this eclipse, about 10 days of Jupiter still in your house of relationship, and make the most of that. And then Jupiter moves into your 8th house. So if there is some shenanigans around money or around needing to increase your fees or needing to, reorganize mortgage or loans or anything like that, with Jupiter going through the 8th, these issues will also be much more harmonious for you. So it looks like the better energy for you will be the further you get into May. Certainly the first week, the energy is very unstable, Libra. So you're good at trying to balance things out, but nonetheless, it's still pretty unstable worldwide. So give yourself time and use this Mercury retrograde period, which is right up until the 14th of May, to reflect on all of these issues and where you want to go with that. So this will give you a boost in terms of confidence and knowing what to do, how to go forward. So best wishes with all of that, Libra, and I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, this is all about you. And I always hear from you in the comment sections because you don't like the way I describe Scorpio. And I have to say, and you're not going to like this either, that's typical Scorpio. You see that stinger in the tail. So I totally expect it. So, give me your best shot, Scorpio, after you hear what I got to say. So I want you to pay attention to this eclipse because it's happening in your first house. And that doesn't matter whether it's your sun, moon, or rising. It's the first house from any of those placements. So this is really significant to you. There's something here, especially with the South Node having gone through here since January of 2022. There's something here that you need to let go of so you can show up differently, and especially in regards to relationships with other people. There's something here that you can decide is kind of done. You're moving on. You've moved past it, or it's no longer interesting, no longer relevant, and you're moving on. This can also be where you realize that there's something that you have not been getting from relationship. And so part of what you're leaving behind is actually something that you're going to be gaining on the other side, because of course the North Node is on the other side from you in the 7th house. Now your 7th house is pretty busy at this time. And so the sun, of course, is there. The sun is what's giving us this full moon. And then the North Node is also there. And because of the North and South Node polarity and the sun and moon polarity, that's how we get the eclipse. But we can also find out a little bit more about what's going on here if we go back in time, about 6 months' time, to the 25th of October, where we had a partial solar eclipse in Scorpio at 2 degrees, which is roughly the placement of the South Node right now. So reflect on that period of time, and then also reflect back on to the 8th of November eclipse from 2022. And at that time, then the moon was where the sun is now. So that eclipse was happening at the 15th or 16th degree of Taurus. And that means that the moon was in Taurus at that degree, but the sun was in your sign, Scorpio, at 15 degrees. So the moon and the sun have swapped places in these two eclipses. So right now, where the moon is where the sun was last November 8th. And if you go back and reflect, let's take it from mid-October, let's say, and go a couple of months around that time, even up until this moment, what has been going on. There's been a lot going on in the house of relationships and in your house of self. You have been sort of the feature sign, let's say, of the last sort of almost year and a half. And you continue to be until the middle of July. So what you can ask yourself at this time is, what are you ready to let go of, and what have you changed in the meantime, and what might still be revealing itself needing changing, because the moon is in your house of self. So there's something very personal to you. It can, of course, have impact on your career by square, and on your home and where you live by square as well. But certainly that polarity between yourself and others is really where we see the most distinction. So the Mercury retrograde, which is also happening from your seventh house, is going to give you an opportunity as well at this time to really reflect on all of these questions. What's going on in my relationship? Am I being valued? Am I valuing my partner? What do I need? Maybe what one question with Taurus in the house of relationship, which is your standard, that's what you get as a Scorpio rising, especially very important for the rising sign. But nonetheless, Taurus is the opposite sign. And so your sense of, what you need in terms of your everyday nurturance, food-wise or sensuality-wise, it's very important for you. This axis is very much to do with values and money as well. And again, it depends where this is showing up in your chart. We'd have to see that house by house, how that feels to you. But nonetheless, this is your opposite sort of alter ego, if you like. So there's a lot to learn at this time. Mercury retrograde will help you with that right up until the 14th of May. Now, the sun is also on Uranus, and that gives you a lot of insight, but that can also give you potentially some new awareness around relationship. There might be some revelations around relationship, something that you might newly understand, or that you might be informed of. And that's because the sun is coming to conjunct Uranus, which it does once a year, and it just happens to be again happening in your sign. So that will happen in around the 18th, 19th degree of Taurus. And so this is going to happen in just days after the eclipse, in fact, like 3-4 days after the eclipse. So at the same time then that's happening, we're going to have Venus moving into your 9th house from the 8th house. The 8th house, of course, being naturally your house in the natural zodiac. So all about what is hidden and secret, what is shared with others in terms of wealth, for example, shared resources of all kinds, shared intimacy of all kinds. Venus being there can be quite nice, actually, for all signs, but Venus especially in the 8th house for Scorpio is quite good because your house of relationship is ruled by Venus. And then Venus is going to go into your 9th house, and that's quite nice because then she starts to surface a little bit more, and you get to have a broader picture, perhaps, of what it is that you want out of life, more sense of a bigger perspective on life. Now, Mars is already there. Your ruler is in the 9th house at the time of this eclipse, but he's not very comfortable in Cancer. And so this can have something to do with challenges, indeed, around potentially around your father, or around people who are in positions of authority, like teachers, lawyers, all those kinds of professors, if you're a student in university, for example, this kind of person. The law in general, the law as it's represented by lawyers or judges is up there in the 9th. And if Mars is there, that can be challenging, which it has been since the 25th of March. And so Venus going in there can smooth out some rough edges and make that a little bit more harmonious, because that Venus and then Mars will be trining your sign, much more favorable for you. Always want to know, you always keep an eye on your ruler, Mars, always keep an eye on what's going on there. So this could also give you just a broader sense of purpose that can help you identify what's going on in relationship. Does my relationship actually match who I am now? Or is on the contrary, is the absence of relationship now something that I need to address? If I have one or don't have one, it's still going to be something that you can reflect upon, and then having a newer drive in terms of what is my purpose, what am I here for, what do I believe, what's important to me. That can help you identify what is necessary in issues around this 7th house. Now, Jupiter's going to swan in there on the 16th of May from the 6th house, where it has been for roughly the past year, expanding your day-to-day work and busyness and perhaps even health issues for you, Jupiter is moving into your 7th house of relationships, as if there weren't enough things going on there already. But this is quite nice. This is really, really quite nice. So hang in there, Scorpio. Whatever is going on looks like it can get quite a lovely boost in the next few weeks. I have to say as well, though, that Jupiter in the 7th can be just as much about deciding to leave a relationship as it can be about engaging more deeply in one, because Jupiter in the 7th house brings good results with regards to partnerships, and that can be business partners as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's like all lovey-dovey. It's really going to be a function of yourself and your natal chart. But the Jupiter nonetheless will give you a sense of this is what's good. This is the right thing to do. So it looks like there's a lot of food for thought for you happening around this eclipse that is going to benefit you personally in terms of what you need to understand about yourself. Certainly a moment of emotional growth. Look back 6 months and try and figure out what was going on there and how it might be relating to right now. And then put it in the comments. You see, I wasn't even mean to you this time. So put it in the comments and let me know what's changing for you. So I'll see you in the next video, Scorpio. Sagittarius, this lunar eclipse is in your 12th house, which is quite a hidden part of this, of the natal chart. It's really about you in terms of all of the aspects of yourself that you don't normally show publicly, which can be as far as your intimate sort of psychological nature, as well as your physical intimacy. The 12th house is bed pleasures as well, what makes you feel good in terms of your own personal needs, the stuff that you don't tell the neighbors. But the 12th house is also far away places. It's things that are just out of sight, out of mind, not necessarily out of mind because it's really what's behind the eyes, but it's it could be the deeper psychological or unconscious processes as well that you're becoming aware of, because the moon is illuminating something here, telling you something. Now, because the moon is in opposition to the sun in your 6th house of everyday work and health and so on, that's where the north node is as well, opposing the south node in your 12th house. So this is an axis that has a lot to do with what supports you every day, are the activities and the things that you do, including the things that you believe and the things that you think about. Your psychological nature affects your physical health, right? The 6th house is being the physical health, the 12th house being the unconscious and the psychological aspects of life, any kind of suffering and misfortune that you might have that, of course, has an impact on your day-to-day life. You've had lots and lots of energy there for quite some time, because not only has the north node been there, Rahu moved in there on at the beginning of January 2022, but you've also had Uranus there for the past 5 years. So there's a lot going on for you in terms of your everyday life, in terms of your physical health and what's important to you in terms of your everyday function. And so maybe now you're welcoming an opportunity to kind of step back and observe what it is that you need from a deeper place. You might become aware of patterns of behavior, like addictions, for example, or just, day-to-day stuff, lazy stuff, things that you're not really engaging with properly that are undermining your well-being. That could be your day-to-day work, like undermining your daily job, or it can be undermining your physical well-being. And that could be what the moon is showing you right now. So these are personal realizations. There could also be some relationship to ancestral understandings, ancestral connections, because not only is the moon in the 12th, but you've got Mars in the 8th as well as Saturn in the 4th. So you're one of these signs that has a lot of energy here with regards to the hidden aspects of life, deep psychological stuff churning up. We've got Neptune in the 4th as well. So your ruler is in the 5th house and about to go into that 6th house. So it's been in the 5th house now almost a year, and Jupiter will go into the 6th house of everyday life to add a lot more energy to an already busy place right now. But that can also be, expanding into better health or better routine. taking care of things in a way that is more constructive. So that's not necessarily unwelcome. Jupiter in the 6th can be very helpful from that regard, gives you more of a boost in that regard. So as I mentioned, we've got Mars in the 8th house. That's a hidden house. That's Mars ruling your 12th house, ruling this moon and the lunar eclipse. It's also ruling your 5th house. It's ruling Jupiter at this moment, your ruler. And so that Mars in the 8th house has been potentially provoking challenges in relationships or in how to organize things around shared resources. That could be with regards to things that are as banal as, who does the dishes, or it could be with regards to inheritance or pension payments or insurance payouts and things like that, that there may have been some challenge or delay or some kind of struggle in that regard. With Mars there you might need to fight for something. You might need to really step up to get what you are owed. If that's with regards to client payments, for example, or business partnership issues, then that can also be potentially a source of aggravation. It's not such a big deal, I wouldn't say, in the sense of the everyday worry about it, because you've had Venus in the 7th house. And so if it is something connected to relationships of any kind or business partnerships, Venus looks like she's been helping, kind of smoothing things out there. And certainly only a couple of days after this eclipse, on the 7th of May, Venus moves into that 8th house. And so she's going to help you out there and maybe finally resolve whatever the financial difficulties were there, if there were any. And if it's not about that, if it might be more like feeling personally agitated, emotionally agitated, because to be honest, the moon in the 12th in an eclipse and Mars in the 8th and then Saturn in the 4th can provoke some really difficult psychological or emotional states where it may not feel that things are going, your way, or you may not feel your usual jolly self, Sagittarius. You usually try and make the best of things, but again, that's dependent on your natal chart. But nonetheless, it's worth taking care of that. And if that is part of the issue in terms of your day-to-day health, then this is a great opportunity to find help, because with Venus in the 7th, moving into the 8th, and then with Jupiter moving into the 6th house, you're going to find the kind of people that you need to work with in terms of clinicians or support people of all kinds, the kind of people that will bring you healing. So that's something to rely on, something that you can, something that you can lean on, let's say, if you are going through a hard time right now. And of course that will pass, because this is a moment in time. This is an eclipse. It's showing you something that can give you realization about perhaps why things might not be so easy for you now, if that's the case. So take all of these things as signs of what action to take. A Mars-ruled eclipse requires action. Go back 6 months to last November. November 8th, there was an eclipse that was where the sun was at that time is now where the moon is. So it was at almost the exact same degree, at 15, 16 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio. And so the moon back then is where the sun is now. So there's a kind of a switch. And so you might have some information in terms of what was happening for you around then that might key you into whatever this issue is. And then go back to the 25th of October, where that particular eclipse, that was a partial solar eclipse, and that was happening at 2 degrees of Scorpio, which is roughly 2 degrees off where the South Node is right now. So there's a lot of resonance from this period of 6 months ago that might help you understand what's going on right now a lot better. So whatever's going on, Sagittarius, I wish you all the best with that, and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, you have this lunar eclipse in Scorpio in your 11th house, and this is about letting go of something, releasing something, perhaps becoming aware of something that needs to change in the areas around long-term goals and your hopes and dreams for the future. It can be with regards to friendships and the groups that you spend time with, that you relate to either politically or just socially or spiritually even. And then that also is something to do with the gains. That might be that you're realizing that there's something you have to let go even financially, that there could be something that you need to resolve in terms of financial, perhaps income, for example, that's coming from something that you're doing. So if you're an entrepreneur or something, something is changing there. Or realization around how you make money in that regard, that can also help you find a way to, you might realize what's going on around how you make money and then make a shift in that way. So the ruler of this eclipse is in the 7th house at this time. So Mars in the 6th house can sometimes be showing up contentious relationships, issues that you might have to deal with important relationships in your life, including your spouse or business partners. It can be challenging, or it can be that you're meeting people who are themselves challenging, that they themselves are coming at you with anger or frustration, and you have to deal with that. So Mercury is retrograde at the time of this eclipse in the same house as where we find the Sun and the North Node in Taurus in your 5th house. And the Sun itself is along with Uranus. So there's a lot of instability at this time in terms of your 5th house activities. That 5th house and 11th house axis is very much to do with creativity, what it is that you want to do in terms of your creative expression, and that can include things that you do around children as well, or the children themselves. There may be something going on in the lives of your children, or something that you are having to contend with around having children, or the ones that are already there, for example. This is also the house of investments. It's also hobbies and things that you enjoy doing. It's the fun stuff. There's a lot of fun stuff in here, but the energy here, like I said, is about reviewing. It's not quite stable. With Mercury retrograde, you might be well advised to, for example, if it is about investments, look at your portfolio, look at where do you take risks usually that you might need to be scaling back. This is not a great time for taking risks unless you're really sure of what you're doing. There's so much unpredictable energy. So again, it comes down to, how much are you willing to lose, basically. It depends on your chart, but Capricorns are generally not risk takers. You usually have a pretty solid head on your shoulders, but nonetheless, some of you are. And for those of you who are, just keep in mind that there's a lot of stuff that is unstable right now that will be shifting in the next couple of weeks. So this period of time around the early part of May into the middle of May and even at the end of May is going to produce quite a lot of coming and going with regards to 5th house issues for you. So that can also be with regards to love affairs as well. So maybe there's some kind of issue going on in terms of your love life. With Mars in the 7th, that could be quite nice because it's quite passionate, but it's not necessarily what you wanted, because that lunar eclipse is happening in the 11th house of what you aspired to, and that looks like it's something that needs to be revised, or that you're recognizing is not what you wanted and you have to let go of it, or it's not available to you and you have to let go of it, for example. Your ruler Saturn is in the 3rd house of communication. So whatever's going on here, especially with the Mars in the 7th, would probably benefit from a good solid dose of communication. That might have something to do with the written word or spoken word, but it could also be around internet, because that's also the 11th house where the moon is at the moment. Maybe if you're working online, or if you are expanding your business online, or you're trying to expose yourself through either a website or social media, there's something here that you're able to take advantage of, recognizing either a new trend or recognizing where you've been barking up the wrong tree, for example, and re-establishing something. So Venus is going to move into that seventh house of relationships from your sixth house of everyday stuff and health and the usual drudgery of life. And she moves into your seventh, and that's going to actually be really nice. It'll soften that roughness of Mars there. And at the same time, so that's 2 days after this eclipse. And then just 10 days later, you have Jupiter moving into your fifth house, which is really nice. That'll be trining your ascendant. So whatever is going on right now, you can spend a bit of time reviewing, trying to understand that a bit better, and prepare yourself for this energetic shift that is coming in the next couple of weeks, because there's something that is going to be highlighting a lot of what I've just described, whether it be around creativity or children, or how you want to see your future, maybe bringing in a new creative expression, a new hobby or something like that in a simple way. But it could also be much more profound in terms of how you want to show up in your life in general, in terms of your own self-expression. So either way, there's a lot going on here for a couple of weeks that is worth slowing down and reflecting on, Capricorn. Don't rush into things, especially in the first half of May. And that will, I think, bring you better benefits in the longer term. So if you go back 6 months from now, look at those eclipses, November 8th and then October 25th of 2022. What was going on in your life at that time? How is that looking different for you now? Or what is a continuation of that in this moment? And see how that might be informing you in terms of what it is that you need to do going forward. So best wishes for all of that, Capricorn, and I'll see you in the next video. For Aquarius, Sun, Moon, and Rising, this is happening in your 10th house. And so you'll find that you are maybe experiencing a sense of having to modify or challenge your ambitions at this time, maybe having realizations around those ambitions and what it is that you'd like to do. There's definitely something here about the life and work balance, your home, personal life, perhaps your family in general, or the literal house, and what you have to do out in the world, a sense of the responsibility that you have outside the home. This could also reflect some duty around parents, for example. There could be something showing up in your parents' life that you need to attend to. That could be a reflection of something that has been building over time, because this is not likely to be a new thing. You could go back as far as 6 months ago and look at the eclipses of October 25th and November 8th and try and understand what was going on then, because this is in relationship to that. Very, very distinctly so. And so especially with what's going on in your home life, that's something that you already had an inkling about last November, very strongly. And then equally, what's going on in career and what you might be seeing you're having to let go of in terms of your, either if it's career or social status, or with regards to your parents, is something that might need releasing. And that also was in some way highlighted at the time of the new moon in Scorpio at the partial solar eclipse of the 25th of October, because that was just 2 degrees off this south node point right now. Another aspect of this is that the ruler of this eclipse moon is in your 6th house, in Cancer. So Mars is working hard in the 6th house, making you very busy, potentially also highlighting issues of health for you, or that you need to work with health issues on behalf of other people, that especially perhaps if it's something to do with, say, your parents, that could have something to do with needing to tend to your parents. You're having to be the caregiver. This also, from Mars in the 6th, that can also be your colleagues or employees that you have if you work in that way. And so if this is the case, if there is something here around career, then the moon is highlighting something about this. So there may be a realization around either you or your employees or colleagues at work that is informing you what to do, how to organize this going forward. So just 2 days after this eclipse, you're going to have Venus moving into that sixth house of everyday life, and that's going to be a lot more harmonious for you in terms of your day-to-day stuff. It'll smooth out the roughness of Mars being there. And given that you've had such a wallop of the last few years, you've had Saturn, your ruler has gone through your first house, powerfully making you grow up, making you feel, more solid maybe in yourself. And then Saturn in your second house right now, of also representing family, your values, your valuables, and stuff that the earnings, your income, for example. The Saturn that is now in the second house. So once you put yourself in order over the last 3 years, you're now putting your belongings and your values in order, but also your family. So again, it looks like there could be something to do with family issues here, perhaps with regards to parents. There's certainly a lot to do with house and home for Aquarius at this time. And then, of course, you've got Pluto. So as if Saturn wasn't enough, you've got Pluto coming into your first sign. I've spoken a lot about that in other videos, so I won't go too deep into that, except to remind you that that Pluto that's just now in your first house is, of course, squaring the nodes for most of 2023 going forward. So from April through almost the rest of the year, Pluto is squaring the nodes in your 10th and 4th houses, and then eventually in your 9th and 3rd houses. I'll speak more about these things as we go. But then just one last thing to leave you on a more positive note is that Jupiter will be moving into your 4th house. So this is where the Sun and Uranus in the North Node and Mercury retrograde are currently. And when Jupiter on the 16th of May moves into your 4th house, the questions of what makes me happy, what do I need to organize around home, how am I doing emotionally and psychologically, what's going on in terms of my family or the actual physical place that I live, Jupiter will bring you a lot of support. And of course, by extension, by opposition, it'll support your career and status and all of those things. So help is on the way. Things will improve, but it is currently very unstable right now, and that may not feel very comfortable for many Aquarius at the moment. But it also is a brilliant opportunity to make change. And given the fixed nature of Aquarius, it's not always easy for you to make change. So this is something that can require you to make change in a way that actually brings you enormous benefit, especially as Jupiter's going to show you more of that from the middle of May onwards. So enjoy this time of Mercury retrograde there in the 4th. You can really dig deep, go into your emotions, try and understand your security needs, your emotional needs, your psychological needs, what's going on at home, all those things that will support you going forward. And when Mercury goes direct again on the 14th of May, roughly, depending on where you live, then this will all be much more clear, and you'll have a sense of really moving forward on these issues. So good luck with everything, Aquarius, and I'll see you in the next video. Pisces, this is happening in your 9th house. So you're having a lunar eclipse on the south node in your 9th house, and that's going to give you some maybe new realizations about an old way of feeling about yourself, an old sense of purpose, your higher aims, and maybe that's something that you're ready to let go now, or that you're realizing a new version of that in fact needs to replace the old version. Because having the south node going through that 9th house basically since January 2022 has been very much about letting go of old beliefs and old ways of showing up religiously or spiritually in your life, a sense of purpose that may have transformed itself over the last almost year and a half. This can have something to do with the father as well. The 9th house is the house of father. And so there may be something going on in your father's life, or it could be with regards to a teacher as well, or a highly placed official. This is also judges, lawyers, and counselors and people like that. There might be some realizations around that. And so this is something that you could recall from a year, from 6 months ago. So from last November, the 8th of November, 2022, we had the sun at this position. So the sun was where the moon is today, or at the time of this eclipse. And the moon was where the sun is at the time of this eclipse. So it's exactly flipped from 6 months ago at the total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November. So this is an opportunity for you to review the last 6 months and see what are those new insights and things that you understand about how you communicate, especially what you need to understand, what you need to develop in terms of your skills, maybe your sense of willpower or your sense of, what it is that you need to hone with regards to how you express yourself, how you teach, how you share information. This can also be with regards to siblings, particularly so, not just because it's the third house where we find the sun right now and the north node, but also because Mercury, which is the Karaka for siblings, representing siblings, is there as well, and it's retrograde. And so there might be something that you need to go over with regards to cousins or siblings, or again, of course, communications and how you're speaking about things, how you even think about things. So new ideas and insights are definitely possible because we've got Uranus conjunct the sun and opposing this moon at the time of this eclipse. And so there can be something quite new and insightful that is triggered by that proximity to the sun. And in fact, they will meet only about 3 days later. And also about 3 days later, you're going to have Venus going into your 5th house, which is really lovely. She'll be trining you then, and joining Mars, which is currently ruling this eclipse. So Venus on the 7th of May joins Mars, which will still be there in the 5th house for another few days. So where her focus has been on your home and your comforts and personal happiness and property as well, or your sense of security, she'll go into this place which is about love and love affairs and fun and a sense of creativity and what it is that you want to do. That can also be with regards to entrepreneurship, for example, which is the 5th house. Venus and Mars both in the 5th house can be really good for people who work on their own. You also have Saturn in the 1st, of course, Pisces, since the 7th of March. And so that's giving you some probably much needed stability in your life at the moment. So it might feel like things need to be pared back. It's a good time in your life for simplicity, for honing things and really shedding things, letting go. And then you also, your ruler, Jupiter, is still in the 2nd house, which has been very helpful in terms of your self-esteem, but also in terms of your income and money and